Hey everyone, welcome. Welcome to our first episode of Money Made Simple. This is a program that we wanted to put together. I've been wanting to do a podcast for quite some time um, to share some of my knowledge, 38 years in the industry, and help some of our folks out there in a different medium. And I want to introduce you to one of my best partners, my son, Nick Lockwood. So Nick's going to join us on these episodes. And Nick, you want to say a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody. My name is Nick Lockwood. I've been with the group for 8 years now. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it's been 8 years at this point. I'm another one of the financial planners on the team, and I think our goal with this podcast is just to give people maybe a different spin on who it is that we are. Most of our clients know us in the office, but I think it would be helpful for everybody to get to see us outside of the office and how we interact with one another. So I'm looking forward to
Yeah, he's been
to
8
doing this.
years with the practice, but I've known him a little bit longer than 8 years, so I
Yeah,
watched
yeah,
him grow up, and, I was honestly, I have to tell you, I was surprised he wanted to come into the industry after,
yeah.
just watching him being a shy little boy, afraid to shake somebody's hand at 10 years old, so, Nick, you've grown a lot, so,
Yeah, and in some ways I've been around for 30 years, been around the team for 30 years.
yeah.
But I think we with this first episode here, we thought it would be helpful to kind of start with an origin story of my dad and our group. And like we said, 38 years, Dad, you've been doing this. So that's a long, long, long time. And so I thought it'd be helpful to share with other people maybe where you came from, how you grew up, how you started in the industry, some of the lessons that you learned along the way. And then hopefully by the end of this, people will have a real good insight into who you are outside the office. So if that sounds okay with
Yeah.
you, maybe
Yeah,
we'll
we've
start
got a
there.
great team, and what's funny is the folks that are on our team all kinda come from very similar, backgrounds. I come from a humble background, and, I tell people I grew up in a trailer park. My mom and dad divorced when I'm the oldest of 3 boys. My mom and dad divorced when I was 10 years old, I think, and, dad wasn't really a good guy, and so he left. Mom had no child support, no alimony, and so she had to go on welfare. And so early on as a kid, struggling to watch my mom work 3 jobs, not knowing if we were going to have dinner that night. My mom shopping for groceries at 6 in the morning because we lived in a small community, but she was ashamed to use her food stamps. So seeing all that just kind of affected me early on. And again, being the oldest of 3 boys, it was on me to take care of my 2 brothers while she was out working. So it was tough. So, and that's the other
Yeah,
thing
some
too, is a lot of folks, Nick, a lot of folks think that financial advisors have always had it good. You know what I'm saying? Because we must know money. We must know how to manage money. We must know what we but along the way growing up, we've learned lessons and we've had to adapt. And so that's probably the my biggest strength.
yeah. Yeah, and I think you've got a really interesting story too that I think it would be great for people to know. I know you wrote that book last year, and so you probably shared a little bit in that book about kind of how you grew up. But yeah, maybe we just start at the beginning. You mentioned dad wasn't around, so you got you and your brothers. Grandma Judy's working a couple different jobs. I know you had some pretty interesting jobs. Maybe let's start there. What was your first job that you ever had?
Well, I want to actually go back a little further. So I want to
Okay.
tell you about role models because when mom and dad, when your grandma Judy and my dad got a divorce, my mom's passed away since then, just for the audience so they know. But my mom had a little bit of a mental breakdown. So she shipped me and my 2 brothers up to her brother, my Uncle Jack. And remember where I'm coming from. I'm coming from trailer park, just trying to get by. And we go up and we spend the summer because my mom needed some time alone. We spend the summer with my uncle. And I go up there and it just kind of opened my eyes. My uncle had a business. He owned a car dealership. He had a son and a daughter, my cousins. They had a house. They were comfortable. I remember swimming in the pool, thinking, man, there is another life. So I started learning more about my uncle. Well, my uncle was the first one in our family to go to college. And so right then I knew I was going to figure out some way to go to college. I had no money, but that was going to be my mission. I was going to get to college because college was the key to success from what I saw from my uncle. And that's not true. That's not true. But in my 10, 12-year-old mind, that's what I equated it to. So he was my first real role model and my mentor. So yeah, so Nick, so going back, my mom was working 3 jobs. Obviously we never got an allowance like some kids did. So I would my first job, it was 5th grade. I was in 5th grade. I had 3 jobs, if you can believe that.
Is
I
that legal?
well, I was a kid. So here's the first job. It was a great story. I went down, I was going there was a liquor store down the street from where we lived in these apartments, and I met Mr. K. Mr. K was the owner of the liquor store, and he just took a liking to me. He's like, "Listen, I'm gonna give you a job. I need you to come by the liquor store twice a day, in the morning and in the evening, and you're gonna look at the ice." He sold ice by the bags, right? He's like, "You're gonna look at the ice, and if you miss if I'm short on ice, you're gonna bag ice until the bin is full, and I'm gonna give you 50 cents. And if you come in and the thing's full, you don't have to work, but I'm gonna give you 50 cents." So I was getting $1 a day basically to go in and make sure that ice was bagged, right? So that was the first thing. The second thing is we used to in the summertime, behind the apartment complex we lived at was an apricot kind of processing center. And so what I did, I got a job where I would go and basically prune apricots. And so have a knife. I would take the apricot out, take the seed out, and lay the apricot out for it to be dried out, and you had dried apricots. So I was earning, $5 a flat from those. And come home, my thumbs were all bloodied up because of the knife that we were using and things like that. But I had spending money. I'll tell you one more story, which is kind of funny. So took this spending money, went down to the 7-Eleven. I bought a bunch of candy. You might have heard the story, Nick, right? I bought a bunch of candy and I took it to the school and I sold it at a 300% markup to all the kids in the school. And and my mom gets called into the office and she's like, "You know what your son's doing?" She's like, "No, I have no idea." She thought I was like in big, big trouble, right? She's like, "No, I don't know." He's like, "He's selling candy to the other kids that he's buying from another store, and the kids are spending all their lunch money on his candy." And my mom's like, "So you're punishing him?" Yeah, so she was proud of me, right? But
Yeah.
but yeah, that was early on, just kind of struggling and figuring out my own way to make money and make it work. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that I actually knew that candy story, so that's a new one for me, but, yeah, okay, so then maybe talk a little bit about Uncle Rick and Uncle Tim, just your brothers, my uncles. I know you in some ways were almost their father figure, not having
Yeah.
kind of dad around the house, right? And so, maybe just share some stories about Uncle Rick and Uncle Tim and what it was like helping them grow up too.
Yeah, just like your brother and sister, you guys are 3 totally different people, and we were 3 totally different brothers, and we had different interests. I mean, I can barely change the oil in my car. My little brother, Uncle Rick, ran a auto shop. He had his own auto shop, so he went to a junior college, and that was his degree, and he ran an auto shop. And my youngest brother has some challenges early on when my dad left and my grandpa passed away because my grandpa was, your great grandpa was our basically our dad, our father figure. But when he passed away, my littlest brother just kind of went off the deep end and he got into some trouble and he's cleaned himself up, but he's a truck driver now, right? And that's kind of what he's done. And he's kind of made his little life up in Idaho as a truck driver. But we all were different, but I think, and again, I love the 2 of them, but I think what's happened is and we've all become each other's role model, if that makes sense, right? Because I know the struggles that Rick went through. My little brother Rick has 5 kids, which is just that's just crazy to me, but And then I know the struggles that Tim went through, and they know the struggles that I went through. So we've all ended up being we were 18 months apart, so we're pretty close to begin with, but we've all become our own little role models to each other. So I'm proud of that. So, you know, I want to kind of move us forward. College, I finished high school. I was working at Baskin Robbins in Visalia, and I was the night manager as a high school senior and freshman in college. And it was fun. I mean, we were on the cruise boulevard, so we got to see all my friends come by cruise and they stopped in for an ice cream cone. But I couldn't afford college, but I knew I wanted to go to college. So I ended up going to Cal State Bakersfield, which was the cheapest college I could find because my mom certainly couldn't help me. So I had to go there. I was working 3 jobs. I was working at Round Table Pizza, Sizzler Restaurant. I was working a lot just to make sure that I finished. I ended up having some student loans when I got done, but I did finish up. But again, it was tough. It was tough coming up that way. So,
Yeah. So you moved from the candy empire to the ice cream empire to get you through college.
well, yeah, but there was some pizza along the way and
Yeah,
some
yeah, true,
Sizzler
true.
steak along the way. So
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, so you get through college, Cal State Bakersfield, you're a road runner that's graduated, you're looking for a job. So what happens after you get through college?
Well, I started doing interviews as a lot of kids do, the spring of my senior year. And I, the Career Center had these job interviews, Nick, right? You see that and you can just sign up for anybody. And I was just trying to practice my interview skills because I had no idea what I was going to do, where I was going to go. I was a double finance marketing major. And I'm like, what the heck can I do as a marketing finance major? So
Didn't
I
you have
went
an
on.
art didn't you have an art or
Yeah, I
theater
was a
minor or
theater
something like that?
minor. I
Yeah.
did plays. I did a lot of high school touring plays with this group. So I did a lot of interesting stuff there. I Another job I had, which was really cool, is it was an improv acting job where I would go in and I would act like in like three different situation scenarios. One, I was a perpetrator and they had to practice interrogating me, right? And I had to pretend that I had done a crime and what I would say, and it was all improv. And then I had to be a witness to a crime. So that was fun stuff. That was my theater minor coming into play. But
Yeah.
I interviewed, going back to the interview. So I interviewed with Lincoln, and there was 12 of us signed up for the interview, and only 2 kind of got to the next step. And so this a lady who ended up being my another one of my mentors, Elaine Hoffman, calls me up and says, "Well, we like you. We want to send you up north for a second interview." And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't go to college to work for an insurance company." And I was bummed. I'm like, I no, I no. And I was thinking to myself, no, this is just a practice interview. I don't really don't want this job. And so I was trying to get out of it. And I told her, I said, Elaine, I said, you know that suit that I wore in that interview? She's like, "Yeah." She's like, "That wasn't my suit. Didn't you notice it was big on me? I borrowed a suit from one of my buddies." And she's like, "You don't have a suit?" And so I said, "No." She's like, "All right, come down to the office Friday and just meet me at 12 noon Friday at my office." So I'm okay. And so I go down there and she ends up taking me shopping. Nick, you've heard this story. She ends up taking me shopping before she's ever hired me, and buys me 2 suits so that I can go on the next interview because she really liked me. So, we were dating your mom and I were dating back then. And I remember going home with those 2 suits on hangers, and I'm taking them into Michelle. And I said, "Look at this, honey." I go, "This lady bought me 2 suits." And she didn't know had no idea who Elaine was. She's like, "So what again does she want you to do?" And so, so she thought that she was buying, suits for some other reason. So she ended up driving me to up north and interview. And everybody I met, was just family, and that's why I ended up with Lincoln. I said, "I'll do this job for a couple years, but it'll look good on a resume, but I'll move on." but I just grown to love the people and ended up loving the mission and the job and what I was doing. And that's why, 38 years later, I'm still here doing the same, well, not the same thing, but mentoring other people, kind of along the way. So
Yeah. So you get hired, and after all these interviews and things like that, what's your actual day-to-day like at the beginning of the career for you?
we this is what this is. I was hired November 1st, 1987. So I just hit my 38th year. Um, and she put me in three hospitals. And so I was sitting in a hospital cafeteria, um, meeting people, basically trying to convince them to save a little bit of money for retirement. We had a product called the 403B, which the company Lincoln was endorsed by the California Hospital Association. So we were in a lot of those hospitals. And I remember her telling me, Mike, you're not selling insurance. You're trying to get folks to save. And I said, okay, well, I guess I could do that. So it was a different experience. I have to tell you a really quick story. The first person I ever signed up, and I still remember his name, and I won't mention his name on this podcast in case he's listening, but he was a good guy. He was just a young. I was 23 at the time, and I think he might have been 30, so he wasn't much older than I was. But he worked at Mercy Hospital, a Catholic hospital. He worked down in the boiler room, right? So he took care of basically all of the mechanical things that would run the hospital down in the basement. And he would come up, and I was there every Wednesday. He would come up every Wednesday just to visit, just to say hi. We ended up becoming buddies. And I remember one Wednesday he came up, and remember he worked in the boiler room, and he came up and he had a smudge on his forehead. And I wasn't raised in a religious background, right? And so I reached across him. I go, Martine, I go, you got a little bit of grease right here. And he's like, no, 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 it's Ash Wednesday, you know. So that he had gotten blessed that day, and so he had his ashes up here. And oh, I'm sorry. So I made so many mistakes early on with folks, but the thing is, I did it from my heart. And so people knew that they always forgave me, for my mistakes early on because they knew I was doing it for the right reason when I would speak with them. So
Yeah, and we've still got a handful of employer cases. So I am up at a hospital once a week, visiting with people, helping them save and things like that. It's a funny position to be in, or just an interesting position rather, where when I started, I was 24, and I'm talking to people who are 60 years old, trying to help them make sense of their retirement accounts or whatever it may be. And it's just, it's interesting as such a young person trying to have those conversations with people who have been in the workforce for so long and presumably would know more than I do, maybe even about some of these topics that we're talking about. So that's probably a shared experience that both of us have, just starting off pretty early.
I was a 23-year-old kid. And I was trying to get a 28-year-old kid. I remember this story too. I was trying to get a 28-year-old kid to save for retirement, right? Just $25 a paycheck. Just start something. And he made a comment to me. He's like, when can I get this money out? I go, well, 59 and a half is when you can take it out. 65 is typically. He's like, 65? I'm not going to live to 65. I'll probably end up dying at 60. What am I saving for? And I looked at him. I said, really? You plan on dying at 60? Well, what happens if that doesn't happen? What happens if you live past 60 and you didn't save because you planned on dying at 60? I thought that was the silliest reason to not save. So
Yeah. You should check in on him if you remember who that
no,
was.
I don't remember. I don't remember those types of people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So at that point, you're working, you're getting people enrolled in 403Bs, helping them to save. Nowadays, there's 20 plus people on the team. So between the time that you first started and now, we've had some pretty good growth of people. Who was the first maybe hire that you brought on, or who was the first person that went from just Mike Lockwood on his own to the beginning of what is now
Yeah,
Oakwood
let me
Wealth
go back
Partners?
just a little bit. So I started in '87. In '92, they asked me to come down to Southern California to basically manage Southern California for the group. So I ended up building a little bit of a practice on my own, but I was traveling around from Ventura down to San Diego, hiring people for other advisors and training them and coaching the advisors on how to coach the kids. I still call every new hire is a kid to me, so I'm sorry. But so we were coaching, I was coaching advisors on how to coach their new hires. I got to the point where, I didn't wanna do that anymore. I wanted to build my own team. And so in 19 9 I mean, I've been an advisor for, like I said, 30 years, but in 19 let me think here, it's 2025 now, so 2008 or 9, we had in our midst a kid who was a, paraplanner, smart as a whip. He was the guy, and I remember I was all on my own, but I relied on him to do a lot of research and understand things. He wasn't quite ready to visit with people, if that makes sense, right? I mean, some people it's a natural, and some it's a learned activity. And but he was smart, and his heart was it was a good heart, and that's how we hire. We hire people with good hearts. He had a good heart, and so I hired Mike Kish, and he was my first advisor that I ever hired that was right under my wing, and he's been with me, ever since. And so now and so from Mike, I've hired another. We've got our 11th advisor starting, December 1st. But we have two advisors, Nick, that you know this, two advisors that we've recruited from other companies that have joined our group and are happy. But most of them are homegrown. Most of them I hired out of college, and we've trained them all the way up. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, coming out of college, I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly. I had some relationships that I'd developed through internships and things like that in college, but I wasn't totally clear on what industry I wanted to go into or what I wanted my job to be. And so I ended up working at a tech company for about a year, and it was a good experience for me just to hang out with people about my age, also trying to start their career in an industry that no one in my family had been in before. But in the back of my mind, I always had a sense of what it was that you did, but I didn't know on a day-to-day basis what that actually looked like. So I figured, I'm gonna go try to do my own thing for a little bit and see how that goes. So long story short, things changed. I wanted to move back down to California from Oregon, and I joined the group, and it's been a great time for me too, because our group always seems to be hiring, young people who come in behind us and we can mentor. And that means that a few steps before I was hired, somebody was hired that could mentor me. And it's just been a really awesome place to get to work, and great people to be around to help one another. But so going back to 38 years, we went through a little bit of your childhood, through high school to college. You got hired. You brought on Mike Kish. You moved down at some point to Irvine to start up the office there. And then from there, it seems like things really just expanded a whole bunch with all the admin folks that we have now, all the different advisors. So there's a lot of different folks that you've hired over the years, but maybe you could just kind of sum up some of the stories or what it was like trying to build out that team and bring on more people so that we had more capacity and you had an opportunity to mentor people. But yeah, maybe just take us through that kind of growth phase that we still are in, but that you really started up maybe back in 2015.
yeah, 2015 we hired Mike, then we hired Val, and then Kevin, um, and then you and Sean, and then COVID hit, right? And so we all were shipped home, and we were all working out of our home. So at that point, what is that? We had 7 advisors, maybe 6 advisors, and probably 5 or 6 staff. And for those that own businesses that lived through COVID, they probably will relate to what I'm going to say. But when I had to send all my staff home, remember I'm paying the salaries on these folks, right? So when I sent them home, I had to, we had to get some computers, we had to get some monitors, we had to really equip them so they can work. We had no idea how long, we were going to be home. I was worried. I was worried that I was going to pay somebody that was going to sit around and watch Netflix, right? And were they really going to give me an honest day's work? And that was such a stupid thought for me because I knew who I hired. I knew they were quality people. And sure enough, these folks worked their tail off. And we had a culture that was built that we just cared about each other, and we we obviously we don't let our clients down, but more importantly to me, we don't let each other down. And so these folks work. So during COVID, we ended up hiring two more advisors, and that was Mary Ann, who came over from another company, and Matt Mansgar. So we actually made two hires during COVID. So Matt was trained via COVID for 2 years with our group before he was out in the hospitals. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride, but I will tell, and here's the thing that I'm most proud of is I haven't lost anybody on my team in at least 15, 17 years. So if we've hired them, they're still here. They because of like I said, we just it's a family. It's a big family, and that's probably one of the, I mean, I'm proud of the relationships I made with my clients because I've got some good grief. I've got some clients that have been friends for 25, 30 years, but I'm really proud of the team and how they stick around and they do the right thing. So anyway, but yeah, so we've
Yeah.
grown, Nick. Yeah.
Yeah. In our world, we often say that there's 3 phases in the career of the advisor. So we've got the survival phase, which is maybe the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You're brand new, you're trying to figure out the career, figure out who you are as an advisor, how you can help people, things like that. After that comes the success phase where you start to you know what you're talking about, you can help people, you're more
You got your
successful in
10,000
your.
hours in.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You've got your hours in, and then you get to the point that you're in now, which we call the significance phase, and that's where your main, of course, you want to take care of your day to day and the responsibilities that you have, but you're thinking more bigger picture about what sort of takeaways or what sort of big picture things do I want to leave with clients and our group, the team that is. So as you now are in that significance phase, what do you feel like are kind of your top priorities, or what is it that keeps you driven, I guess, because you're always very driven, but what is it nowadays that keeps you driven and happy to
That's
show up, and what is it that you want to leave?
Nick, that wasn't on the pre story here, but so that's a good
We
question.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
really good. So, to me, it's one family, you and your brother and sister and your mom. That's my number one priority. My second family is my office, and so I like seeing. The thing that I'm most proud of is watching. Again, they're still my kids, the guys, the folks I hire, watching them grow, watching them get married, watching them buy their first house, have their first child, and knowing that I was part of all of that. You know what I'm saying? It's like I gave them the runway to be successful. And again, I think that's another reason why nobody's left because they appreciate that. But beyond that world, I do think we everyone needs to get to a point where they're reaching out outside of their immediate circle and trying to make a difference. We've had, you and your brother play baseball at a high school here, and I think it was Grant's freshman year, one of the coaches passed away. And so we started a scholarship fund, and I'm the one that funds that scholarship. So every year, three seniors get a scholarship to go on to the next step in their career, whether it's college, technical school, or whatever. And so that's a big deal to me. I like that. We are part of another not for profit where we get we have three or four not for profits that we support, and they appreciate what we do. They tell us that. Um, I've been involved just recent last 18, 24 months with a group that makes documentaries and that is really, I think, making a difference, telling stories. My whole premise and what I've learned in this 38 years, I say this to everybody, is everybody has a story to tell. You may not think the story is interesting, but I trust you trust me, when you start telling that story, it's interesting. You know, you and that's what the beauty of my job now is. Every new person I meet, you meet with me a lot of times. We're listening to that story. And it's an interesting story. There's good stuff in there that like, wow, I didn't know that. Tell me more. Right? And you're learning about people. And then like I tell everybody that comes into our office has a new client has a different puzzle to put together, right? From their financial priorities, their goals, some of the experiences they've had in the past with finances. Everybody has a different puzzle, and that's the beauty of what we do is we get to put together those puzzles with our clients. That's the significance to me. Yeah, and then the great thing along the way is you and Matt or Heather or whoever's in there is learning along with me on what we're doing, which is pretty cool. So
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the first episode of Money Made Simple with Oakwood Wealth Partners. The goal of this first podcast was just to give you a sense of our origin story, where we came from, my dad's childhood up through where he is in his career. Moving forward, we're going to be going through topics that people want to hear about, questions that people have. So we'll get a little bit more technical with some of the financial planning and things like that. Along the way, we'll want to bring in some of the other advisors and trusted contacts that we have in-house to hopefully be a good resource for you. Dad, do you have anything before we
yeah,
sign off?
yeah, I want to thank everyone for joining us. This is something new for us, but I want to end to make sure that everyone knows I how much gratitude I have to what I do and who I work with. And that's really we are at the point now to Nick had asked about significance. We are now at the point where I want to give back. We need to educate. We have a challenge out there with financial literacy and people don't know some simple concepts. It's amazing some of the things that I'm asked and we just want to dispel some of those questions and help with some of those questions. Again, Money Made Simple. We chose that title for a purpose. So, Nick, you did a great job hosting and interviewing me. So I appreciate everybody's time, and I hope to see you again. We're gonna do this on a monthly basis. That's our goal. So look forward to see it again. Money Made Simple. I'm Mike.
Hey, you were a theater major or minor rather. I think that translated down to me maybe in the podcasting form, but at a minimum, I did take some ballet classes in college. So
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
my comfortability comes from that.
Yeah, well,
So
that'll be
we'll see.
another topic of discussion on how much money I paid for you to take ballet classes and learning how to sleep.